one. Welcome back into the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap. We are presented by Full Press Coverage. Make sure you go to that website, fullpresscoverage.com, for lots of great articles and content. I know, Sap, you just wrote a very interesting article about a television phenomenon, Hard Knocks, and talking about bringing it to the NBA or some version of that. Is that more or less what the article is?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think it would be fascinating because the best personalities in sports, I mean, boxers are great personalities. The big soccer players, whether it's Ronaldo or Messi, are huge personalities. But in terms of team sports in the United States, it's not even close. The biggest personalities are in the NBA. So I'm just thinking of an idea of what team would be the best team for HBO and, say, the NBA to focus their cameras on and give us the NBA's version of Hard Knocks. And I would call it Loose Balls, right? Because I think that would be a pretty cool name for that. And, you know, I wrote my column, and the two most obvious choices, and I want to get your feeling on this too, Jet. The two obvious choices are the Lakers and the Nets, right? I mean, we're talking about the two biggest media markets, the two teams that are just loaded with future Hall of Famers, the LeBron James and Anthony Davis and Russell Westbrook. I mean, I can name all 13 guys on the Lakers, and they're all, you know, brands unto themselves. Then, of course, you got Brooklyn with Durant and James Harden, and Kyrie would be interesting to follow. So those are the two obvious ones, right? I think that's pretty simple. I went with the Miami Heat. And the reason I went with the Miami Heat is, first of all, just having the cameras at South Beach, I think, would be fascinating. There's great scenery down there, right? And I don't mean just the Atlantic Ocean,
right?
You know, it's a hip, chic, sexy place to be. You also have two guys who are now teammates after Kyle Lowry signed as a free agent to go along with Jimmy Butler, who's been there a couple of years. You have two interesting characters, like irascible, old school guys who play nasty defense, who are team leaders, who were, you know, Butler's in his early 30s, Lowry's in his mid 30s. I think they'd be fascinating. And I'd love to see the dynamic with those two guys, with Tyler Hero, who's so young and, you know, doesn't play defense. Those two guys are committed to the defensive end, but also they're so serious as players. And we've heard the last year or two that Tyler Hero really enjoys the trappings of being, you know, a good looking basketball player in South Beach. So that would be an interesting dynamic. And then I just felt that if Lowry and Jimmy Butler got tired, you bring in Markieff Morris and PJ Tucker, who were both kind of defensive enforcers for the last two NBA championship teams, the Lakers and the Bucks respectively, and they could beat up on Tyler Hero. I think that would be a fascinating dynamic with the Miami Heat. Look, the obvious choices are the Lakers and Nets. Those are easy, but I went with one that was a little bit different.
Yeah, you know, I think it's interesting with the Lakers. You'd be watching to see, you know, all the stars, obviously, but see how it kind of comes together and be like, oh, okay, so this is how they built the championship team. And the Nets, I think people will be watching to see if it falls apart.
Right.
You know, I think that's like, you're like, oh, I really want to see what these three, you know, crazy guys, like, you know, that's maybe a little bit unfair to Harden. He's just more of like he likes to, you know, party and eat and stuff like that. He's not really crazy. Kyrie's certifiable.
Right. And Durant, you just chronicle him sitting at home all day on Twitter.
He's grumpy. Yeah. He's constantly upset.
Yeah. And Kyrie's probably, you know, going to talk about what books he's read and try to show us that he's the smartest guy in the room. And Harden just goes to strip clubs and casinos. So that would be interesting.
Yeah. I mean, so I get that it's fair to, you know, throw those two teams out because obviously those are the two logical answers. Yeah. And Sap, correct me if I'm wrong. Was this idea inspired by LeBron James saying how much he enjoyed Hard Knocks and wants to bring it to the NBA? Or do you guys just have the same mindset?
We have the same mindset. I mean, he's the brightest basketball player, the greatest player ever, and I'm the deepest thinker doing a podcast in this country. So, yeah, I think that we're pretty much aligned. He's also a Dallas Cowboys fan, or that's what he says until he was rooting for the Browns one year. I do think he grew up rooting for the Cowboys. LeBron was born in 1984, so when he first got into watching sports, by far the two most dominant teams were who? The Cowboys in the NFL and the Bulls in the NBA. Sure. So I think that's where he was. I mean, Cleveland was he going to be a Browns fan with,
No.
with Bill Belichick as the head coach, and they had one winning season with Belichick as the head coach? No. And
they weren't even there for part of his life. They were
right. Yeah. They went away for a few years. Exactly. And then came back. And now I think actually I picked them to win the Super Bowl this year, the Browns.
It's a terrible pick.
No, it's not. They're going to beat the Rams in the Super Bowl. You see.
Okay. Well,
all right. What are you going to go? What are you going to go with? Kansas City and Tampa Bay, like everyone else?
Yep.
Okay.
Kansas City, Tampa
Mr.
Bay.
Obvious.
I actually haven't thought about it yet.
Mr. Obvious there.
I'll do my pick closer to the season.
What a chalk player you are. The Lakers and Nets in the NBA Finals, the Chiefs and the Bucks in the Super Bowl. You must have had secretary at the show in the 70s.
I think the Dodgers have a pretty good chance to get to the World Series this year.
There you go. Hey, my Giants are right there, though.
It's nice, though, when you can trot out 5 former MVPs on the same team, the Dodgers. That's not bad. But here's the thing about a basketball version of Hard Knocks, which I would kill to see. I think it would be awesome. You could pick almost any team and it would be really fun because they do have great personalities. So in that vein, Sap, I'm going to go with a team that is not a good team at all, but I think has maybe the best personality in the NBA, the Minnesota Timberwolves.
I get you. That's a good one. Yeah,
I love Anthony Edwards. They're a mess, the Timberwolves always. So there's that enthusiasm. Alex Rodriguez is for some reason coming into the equation. So you get that involved too.
That's awesome. Yep.
So that's, all of that goes together. And again, Anthony Edwards, I have not seen a boring interview with him yet. So I think that would be entertaining. You got, Karl Anthony Towns is a well-known guy. So is D'Angelo Russell. D'Angelo Russell has done some questionable things in the past, like sharing cell phone footage of Nick Young cheating on his girlfriend. So who knows what that guy's capable of. They'd be interesting, Sep. I mean, again, I could pick virtually any team. Another team that I'd pick for similar reasons is the Knicks. I just kind of want to see how it all goes down in New York. Thibodeau is, kind of intense, to say the least.
You think? He's kind of... Is he the Belichick of the NBA in that sense, or Popovich? Popovich or
no, you have to win to be those guys.
That's true too. Yeah, Popovich. Well, Popovich does win. I mean, he's Belichick hasn't won without Brady, and Popovich hasn't really won without Tim Duncan. So maybe that's the thing they have in common. But yeah, Thibodeau is intense to say the least.
So that plus, Dolan, if the cameras are running, is going to want to get involved and pitch his music, in front of the cameras. So there's that aspect. Kemba, that's an interesting dynamic there. I feel like all the players in the team, Randall, I think all the players in the team are worried that they're going to get traded at some point on a whim. So yeah, I'd like to see them too. Again, this is what's sort of awesome about it, Sap, is that if they did it, you could really tune into any team with probably the exception of like the Jazz and the Spurs. And it would be really interesting because of the personalities. San Antonio, it would be boring as sin. He wouldn't let them say anything.
It'd be like the Patriots.
That's why the Patriots wouldn't be good TV for Hard Knocks. You'd get nothing. And the Jazz, like LeBron, said, no one even thinks about them. So I don't know if that show might have to be like behind a paywall or something like that.
Yeah, I would want to watch that.
Yeah, I mean, Sap, I could go down the list and I think you could pick any team and say, okay, this guy would be interesting to watch. This dynamic would be interesting to watch. Yeah, maybe another team that wouldn't be so fun is the Clippers if Kawhi Leonard was there because you'd get nothing out of him.
Silent film. You'd need
he's not really made for TV. He's not that type of personality. But like if you're talking about the Knicks and the Timberwolves, those are
what about Philadelphia?
Deep cuts for me as an NBA fan. Philadelphia would be great. There's so much drama going on. We talked about this in our last podcast. Battle of Ben Simmons stuff. Drama creates good television. That would be really fun to watch. Embiid's a great personality. Also, if you wanted to look at teams that are competitive, Phoenix I think is interesting because now you have them coming off an NBA Finals loss, and that's really interesting to see how teams sort of recover from hardship. And Chris Paul, it hasn't really worked out in the other places he's gone for long periods of time. Does his act start to wear thin on their younger stars, Ayton and Booker? How does Monty Williams, who is a great personality in and of himself and a great person, how does he sort of deal with trying to rally the troops after a tough finals loss where they lost 4 straight games? Milwaukee, you have the whole narrative about winning the championship for the first time in 50 years in Milwaukee. Um, Dallas, I think, would be interesting too, because you got this young star player who's going to get increasingly frustrated with the roster. Mark Cuban is involved too. So that's sort of the awesome
Yeah.
thing about the show. And I'm sure you said this in the column, is that the
Yeah.
NBA sort of lends itself to this. I'm surprised they haven't done it.
Yeah, really. I mean, because the NBA, and I can just speak from experience, is by far the best league at accommodating the media. When I was growing up in the business, the first team, well, the Patriots were also great to me when I first started. And I was like 16, 17 years old when I started. And the Patriots allowed me into games, practices, press conferences. Tom Hoffman was the public relations director with the Patriots. He was phenomenal. It was great. And the Celtics were also great. And Jeff Twiss, Todd Rosenzweig were in charge over there, and they accommodated me, and it was fantastic. Uh, the access to players, you had access to the players, was just phenomenal. It's not quite the same as it was back then. I mean, you could go into a locker room back in the 80s, an hour and a half before the game, and go up to George Gervin or Alex English or, any star, and say, John Sapichetti, so-and-so, when you come out to shoot, can you give us 5 minutes? Absolutely. They come over and give you a one-on-one interview for 5 minutes. Bird, Magic, Jordan were all great after games, very accommodating. I mean, the league understands that. They're the best at understanding that. It's a little bit different now because the players are a little more protective. The organizations are a little more protective. But yeah, Minnesota is a great choice because, again, it's a way out from left field choice, right? Because it's like the Minnesota Timberwolves, who have to be one of the worst organizations in all of sports. But now you throw in Alex Rodriguez as an owner. Anthony Edwards is a character and a half. Cat could be interesting. And, that would be a really interesting choice.
Yeah, I'm telling you, D'Angelo Russell's the wild card in that
Oh,
situation.
God, yeah.
You just don't know what he's capable of. The reason it's surprising also that the NBA hasn't done this, Sap, in addition to what you're saying about how accommodating they are with the media, is that I think that they could use it to really build the profile of younger stars in the league and
Yep.
stars in smaller markets like Minnesota to their advantage. We talked about this as the finals was approaching. I mean, everybody was looking at Phoenix versus Milwaukee. That's sort of an odd finals. And I was saying, and I think you agreed with me, Sap, that it was a great thing for the league because you're giving these smaller markets and teams that people aren't really familiar with, and some players that people aren't as familiar with, outside of Chris Paul and Giannis, obviously, a chance to have a national showcase. So that's what sort of surprises me that they haven't done this yet, because I feel like they could use that to bolster the Q rating of certain players or teams and have more enthusiasm on a national level, because basketball, and you've said this many times, Sap, is a national sport. It's not a regional sport like hockey or baseball, where you have people tuning in to see specific players who may be playing in small markets. You talked about, obviously, Sap, you've said this a million times, LeBron played in the Cavaliers for most of his career.
Oh, sure.
That's not a notable NBA market with Cleveland, but they had the most games on TV usually. People were tuning in specifically to watch them because LeBron was there. So it's a national market. And I think that if they did a Hard Knocks type show, it would really play into building that national market even more for teams that don't get necessarily as many national TV games as, say, the Lakers or the Nets. Sap, would this be what the NFL does and have it be in the preseason, or would it be following a team over the course of the regular season?
I would do it during the regular season. Training camp in the NBA is not as interesting as training camp in the NFL when you have cuts. I mean, there generally aren't big
because
cuts
that's sort of the biggest
in
thing in Hard Knocks. Like the cuts thing creates a lot of drama.
Right. You find out about player X who you don't even know anything about, but he's an interesting character. He's the backup tackle. Is he going to make the roster? And, just kind of assistant coaches that are big personalities that are interesting. I mean, this year with Hard Knocks, you've got Dallas, which is Jerry Jones, who was my favorite owner in all of sports. I mean, he is, to me, he's comical. He just literally is. I mean, he's George Steinbrenner. And I love those owners because I think they really want to win. Sometimes they don't help themselves and they get in their own way, but I think in their heart, they really want to win. But sometimes they don't know how to get out of the way and let people know more about the sport, help them win. But fascinating characters. So yeah, I in training camp probably wouldn't be all that interesting. Wouldn't you want to be on the road with some of these guys too? Like a 3-game road trip to, I don't know, New York, Philly, and Boston. Or maybe Boston's a bad example, but places that are kind of fun cities where maybe the guys get out and have a good time. And you'd have
How
to have a
dare you
partner.
rag on Boston, Sap?
Yeah,
Come on.
what would you? Yeah, because the restaurants close at 10 and the bars close at 11. That's going to be riveting stuff. Yeah, so I mean, I think that it would be interesting. Now, you remember when the NHL had something like this on HBO leading up to the game on January 1st,
The outdoor game.
the outdoor game, right?
The Winter Classic. That's
Winter
what they call
Classic.
it. Yeah.
So there was a build up to the Winter Classic, and that was great. And they would follow, I believe, both teams that were in it, or at least one of them. But it would be a few games at home, a few games on the road, and it would be a 3 or 4 week lead up to that. That's what I would do. Maybe you do it with the Christmas game. Maybe you do 2 teams. Maybe the big Christmas. Well, obviously the big Christmas game this year is Brooklyn and the Lakers. So that but you get my point. Pick a team. And just do it, a month into the season, because training camp's just not as interesting in basketball it is in football. I mean, football training camp is competitive. I mean, because it's like, people are fighting for their lives. The NBA, these guys have guaranteed contracts. I mean, any guy on the Lakers, if you're following them, they're all pretty much set financially. Even like, Kendrick Nunn is in good financial shape, and he's the 11th guy on the team. Whereas in the NFL, some of these guys' dreams are going to die because they're going to get cut and never be professional athletes again. So I think you'd have to do it during the season.
Yeah, and obviously that lends itself to a little bit of complications because the coaches would not be thrilled with that
right
at all.
No. Yeah, that's why the coach becomes important. So like, who's a wild card coach? Certainly Popovich isn't one. Would Eric Spoelstra? You're coaching in Miami, so there's a little bit of sexiness there.
Yeah, he's not a wild card coach.
Yeah,
so,
I mean, you would need someone that's a little. I mean, look, in the day,
Luke Walton.
Yeah, who you want to watch the Sacramento Kings? I mean,
no.
We love De'Aaron Fox and Davion Mitchell. I mean, but how much are you going to get out of that? But yeah, you need some sort of.
It's
character.
not really a coach personality league for whatever reason.
No,
I know, a lot of these guys are ex-players too, so it's weird. But
yeah, well, the NFL does have
a lot more
personality
with their coaches.
Yeah,
probably because their staffs are way bigger too. The coaching staffs. Yeah. So by virtue of just numbers.
And there's also in football, a lot of those assistant coaches are Southern, and just by nature, those guys are characters, right? I mean,
so you would have liked to see Stan Van Gundy last year on this version.
Oh yeah, that would have been interesting. Actually, look, personally, I like him. Politically, I'm pretty much aligned with him. He's very far. He's actually more to the left than I am. He's even more to the left than Popovich or Steve Kerr. He's the most liberal. Well, he's now a former coach in the NBA, so that would be kind of interesting to go there. There aren't a lot of real huge personalities as coaches. I mean, Thibodeau is probably the most intense, and Popovich is Belichick. I mean, they're the same guy. I'm trying to think who's the coach that coached the Knicks for a short period of time, and I think he's back on the Lakers sideline, and he coached Memphis for a while, and I think he was an assistant in Miami.
David Fizdale.
Yes, I think he would be.
He's got a good personality. He's got a great personality,
but he's not a head coach now. But you know what? He's an assistant coach. Maybe Jason Kidd would be interesting.
Yep, he'd be interesting.
I think that would be Doc. I think would be interesting because Doc is incredibly charismatic, right?
Yeah, he is. Monty Williams we talked about he's just such a great guy, and I think he's a powerful speaker. I don't think he's not going to say anything crazy, which is kind of what you'd prefer. But
that's why Rex Ryan was great in this.
He was great.
He's perfect.
That's probably the best season that they've ever done of Hard Knocks was the one with the Jets because of the Jets stink and people were interested in seeing how dysfunctional it was. And Rex Ryan had such a great personality for it.
Yeah, and Darrelle Revis was going through a contract squabble. I mean, that was perfect.
And Antonio Cromartie didn't remember how many kids he had.
And nor should he. He's got as many kids that are on the Lakers roster right now.
Yeah, that was I think the best season that they've done.
Without question.
But yeah, so I agree with you, Sap. I think that it would be really interesting to watch in the NBA, and hopefully your column gets to Adam Silver's desk and he implements it.
Yeah, I will send
tweet at him. Does he have a Twitter? Probably, right?
No, but we're Facebook friends.
Oh, well, there you go. Just DM him on Facebook.
Well,
Perfect. Send him the article.
We have the same birthday, April 25th. I think he's 3 years older than I am.
Natural, easy way to enter a conversation.
We're both Tauruses.
I would like to see you guys standing together. You look like the number 10.
Oh, without question, yeah, because he's about 6'4", maybe $170, and I'm like 5'9", 245. So yeah, we would look like Laurel and Hardy.
Yes, I think it would be a very fun duo to be walking out together. Out on the streets of Boston at 9:00 at night when the restaurants are about to close, like you said.
Yeah, pretty much.
So maybe it reaches him.
Yeah.
All right. So Sap, that article is up now.
Yep, up there now on Full Press Coverage.
All right, so please check that article out on Full Press Coverage, and let us know what you think. Tweet at us at JetStryer, at JohnSap25. Let us know what teams you would want to be on a NBA version of Hard Knocks, and why. Is there a specific player you want to see? A dynamic between the team? So yeah, tweet at Sap or me. Let us know what teams you'd want to see on it, and read the article on FullPressCoverage.com. We are the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap. I'm Jet. That's Sap. And make sure you check our podcast out wherever podcasts are indeed found. Again, find our Twitters at JohnSap25, at JetStryer. And we will talk to you down the line, everybody. Thanks for listening. See ya.